Welcome back to KC Talks EV. So in today's episode, I am in the Maxus eDeliver 9. First of all, I just want to thank Clapham Commercial Maxus York, which are based in Elvington, for lending me the car for 2 days for testing purposes. They've been extremely supportive, and most certainly, if I needed a van, for example, I wouldn't hesitate to contact them. So thank you so much, Clapham Commercial Maxus York. So this is actually the first van that I've ever driven, both in petrol, diesel or electric versions, and it's been very interesting to get used to it, and I will actually discuss it a little bit more as the video goes on. So this video is going to be split into 6 sections. So first of all, we're going to talk about the general specifications that you can get with the Maxus eDeliver 9. We're also going to have a bit of a side note about electric vans in particular. Then we're going to talk about what it feels like to drive, some aspects that I still feel need a little bit of improvement, and most importantly, I think, the scenarios which I would expect this vehicle to be really, really good for. And then finally, we are going to conclude. So anyway, let's get started. So first of all, let's talk about specification. So the eDeliver 9 actually comes in 3 different battery sizes and 2 wheelbase lengths. The best point of reference that I found, especially as I'm not particularly used to vans and I'm not particularly used to and comfortable with the specifications of them, was probably the Ford Transit. The reason why is because it also comes in different wheelbase lengths, and they're very similar if you actually have a look at them side by side. So to start off with, the medium wheelbase model actually has either a 51.5 kilowatt hour battery or a 72 kilowatt hour battery pack. The long wheelbase model can actually be configured with all 3 battery packs, the 51.5, the 72 and an 88.5 kilowatt hour battery pack. Interestingly, the WLTP range for both the medium and long wheelbase models are actually exactly the same. So all models have a 150 kilowatt electric motor that is equivalent to 204 horsepower and 228 pound-foot of torque, which is absolutely brilliant. In fact, actually, just like other electric vans, the response from 0 to 30 miles an hour is exceptional, and it really actually goes up until its top speed, which I think is electronically limited to 100 kilometers an hour or 62 miles per hour. So as I mentioned, this part of the video is going to be a small side note on electric vans in particular. So electric vans normally weigh a little bit more compared to their petrol and diesel counterparts, and that's purely because of the weight of the battery pack. Now, what that means, in effect, is essentially you get slightly less payload in comparison to a petrol or diesel equivalent. So as a result, the government has actually increased the weight limit for electric vans, or alternatively fueled vans in particular. So that does include other options such as hydrogen. They've increased it to around 4,250 kilograms. So that is quite a significant increase. Now, the reason why they've done that is because on a standard license, you can actually drive up to 3.5 ton. That's why these sort of size panel vans are considered 3.5 ton. As a result, essentially, by increasing that, hopefully it should mitigate the increase in battery size or battery weight, and hopefully mean that the payload isn't as badly affected. So to do this, assuming you got your license after 1996, now if you got your license before 1996, you would have been grandfathered into being able to drive up to 7.5 tons. Essentially, you need to have at least 5 hours of instructor-led training of some sort. Now, I've been trying to find this online and I haven't been too successful on that, but I will give you the government report that kind of outlines the new legislation that's been put in. Now, the reason why I'm driving this particular vehicle is because this vehicle is an N1 spec, meaning that it is below 3.5 ton. The payload capacity is 860 kilograms, so it is a little bit lower compared to other vans. However, as I've just mentioned to you before, with the N2, you can drive this assuming you've had the extra 5 hours of training, which is much easier compared to getting a Category C license. So what's the Maxus eDeliver 9 like to drive, and what's the cabin like? So first of all, I'm going to preface this by going, I've never driven a van before, so if all of this sounds fairly obvious, I do apologise. But first of all, you sit very high and the windows are massive. So the windscreen's massive and also the side windows. So you get very good visibility, which is obviously very important when it comes to a panel van. This car has also got blind spot monitoring, so that comes as standard as far as I'm aware, as well as front and rear parking sensors and a reversing camera, which is really, really vital, I think, with a car that is 5.5 meters in length. In terms of wind noise, it's fairly refined as well, so I did do a quick test on the motorway. We're looking at 72.3 decibels, so not too bad, not particularly that great either. I think it's pretty normal. And to be quite honest, you know, again, it's not so loud that you can't hear anyone or you can't have a conversation. And most importantly, normally I'm listening to a music or an audiobook or something, so I normally just crank up the volume on the motorway anyway. So overall, the cabin's fairly sturdy. I reckon it would stand the test of time for a van driver. It's all hard plastic, however, so just keep that in mind. Although that being said, do you really want soft touch plastic and things? It's not probably the biggest priority on most van drivers' lists. But that being said, everything that you touch, for example, the steering wheel and all of the controls, they are quite nice, and there's not really any major issues with that. I'll give you some shots of the general cabin as well. So I think there are two kind of major aspects where I think Maxus could improve on the next generation or a facelift model. So first of all, the infotainment system. Now the infotainment system really isn't that bad. It's pretty simple to use and it's fairly slick, fairly quick. I also love the fact that we still have manual button controls for the air conditioning and heating. That means you can use muscle memory once you're used to where it is, rather than having to fiddle through an entire infotainment screen to, for example, turn on the heated seats or, you know, something like change the air conditioning or heating, which is really annoying in my opinion. But the one thing about the infotainment system is it has Apple CarPlay but doesn't have Android Auto. And in my honest opinion, that's really not great. So I have all Android devices and I would expect a lot of other people would as well. So not having Android Auto is annoying. The second thing, and then this is really nitpicking, I think, I've noticed that the door locks sound as if either a gun has gone off or alternatively you've ran down a plastic cup or a metal can or something. It's not a very nice sound, and if I'm honest, every time you, for example, get in the car and then move, obviously it then activates. It really confused me for the first 2 days. But realistically, I mean, a better sounding door lock is probably the worst thing I could possibly say at this point. So most certainly 2 rooms for improvement, I'd say, that Maxus needs to do on the facelift or, for example, the next generation. So as I mentioned, I think there are 2 major scenarios where the Maxus eDeliver 9 would completely make sense for these 2 particular jobs. So first of all is tradesmen. So for example, you are a plumber or an electrician or a heating engineer or something, and you need to carry around all your gear as well as raw materials for job sites and things like that. So the second area, which I think would have a massive, huge benefit for having an electric van over, for example, a petrol diesel equivalent, is definitely multi-drop or last mile delivery drivers. So for example, you need to drop packages to customers and you have to do it multiple times throughout a town, city, or even a rural environment. So why do I think that? I think there are 3 major reasons why. And first of all, fuel savings. So if you do around 80 miles a day, for example, and you can also have access to an off-peak electricity tariff at home or, for example, at work, Go Fast is probably the best example that I can give. So even on the more expensive rate that I'm about to go on in May 2022, so 8.5 pence per kilowatt hour. Is it 8.25 pence per kilowatt hour? Anyway, somewhere around there. If you assume WLTP efficiency, so around 2.4 miles per kilowatt hour, you'll be looking at around £2.72 a day to charge the car, or 3.4 pence per mile. Now, the thing is that if you then compare it to, for example, a Transit, so I think they quote 34. Realistically, after speaking to some tradesmen, 30 is about right. Definitely a lot less in towns or cities. So if you use a fairly optimistic 30 miles to the gallon, you'll be looking at a cost of £20.58 at £1.70 a litre for diesel. That's 25.7p a mile. And that is a significant saving. That is £17 a day, assuming you do 80 miles. Now, the reason why I picked 80 miles is because realistically on a Go Faster tariff, you're not going to be able to charge more than about 80 miles a day on the off-peak rate. At that point, the peak rate kicks in, and again, you would still be saving quite a significant amount. So you'll be still around 10 pence per mile versus 26p per mile. So the second thing is maintenance. Now, the warranty is pretty much bog standard as far as I'm aware. So it has 5 years, 60,000 miles. And the battery, I think, is warranted for 8 years and 100,000 miles. And the service interval is 1 year, 20,000 miles. As far as I'm aware, that's fairly average for panel vans of this particular size and about right for the market. However, the thing is, it's actually the other aspects of it and the requirement, for example, to do certain repairs. So the biggest problem, especially with multi-drop delivery, is that you start your day, you end up at customers' houses and you have to start and stop your engine. Now, what that means is that essentially your starter motor is going to be basically ruined by it. I know that they do obviously make them a bit more robust, but the fact is that if for example, you're doing 100 packages, that's 100 start-stops. Second of all would be things like your 12-volt battery as well, because of the constant start-stop. And finally, don't forget about things like your clutch. Now, the biggest kicker, however, is the DPF filter, or diesel particulate filter. Now, after talking to some tradesmen about it, what I've discovered is that it's basically the bane of their existence with a diesel van. Essentially what it does is it filters out the particulates, or essentially soot, that comes out of the exhaust pipe. It naturally occurs just because of how a diesel engine works, really. Now, the problem is that when it gets initially clogged up, what you can do is the van will automatically undergo what's called a regeneration cycle. But in order to do that, it does need to be very hot. So normally you have to absolutely fly down the motorway in order to get enough temperature to essentially take all the particulate matter and turn it into carbon dioxide. That's the science bit done, at least. So if you don't do that, for example, and you just keep allowing it to be clogged, eventually you either will need to clean it, which is professionally done, so it costs £200-300 to do, according to some people and according to some prices I've looked at. Or alternatively, it needs a full DPF replacement. That is going to cost you, £1,000-2,000 possibly. Now, the thing is that you may say, well, I can just remove my DPF filter. Please don't do that. So it's not illegal to actually remove it. However, it is illegal to be driving around in a particular vehicle that has a DPF that you've removed. So finally, it's the ultra low emission zone, or ULEV, congestion, and zero emission zones, so ZEZs. So currently, London charge you £15 a day to drive into London, unless if you have a zero-emission vehicle. So that is zero entirely. I don't even think plug-in hybrids anymore are exempt from that. Definitely things like the Toyota Prius are not exempt from that, so you still have to pay it. So that's £15 a day. Now, if you drive into London every single day, that would save you a significant amount of money. There are other places in the UK as well. So, for example, Oxford has initiated a zero emission zone. Now, it's very, 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 very small. But that being said, they are planning on expanding it at some point in time. I have looked at the roadmap going ahead. And if I'm honest, if you drive in those areas, I think that's £10 a day as well. At the end of the day, especially with a van like a Maxus E-Deliver 9, it's large enough in order for you to do your work. But most importantly, it also saves you absolutely tons of money when it comes to fuel savings, maintenance, and then finally, if, for example, you're in a congestion charging zone or a zero emission zone, or ULEZ, for example, the ULEZ becomes a bit more important if you have an older van. So any Euro 6 compliant van at the moment, as of April 2022, you do not have to pay the ULEZ charge. But for example, if you have an slightly older van, so anything built before 2015, 2016, it is definitely worth considering upgrading to an electric van. And to be honest, with the Maxus E-Deliver 9, I've been driving around in it for the last 2 days, and it's been really, really good. So overall, I can definitely understand why the Maxus E-Deliver 9 exists, and why especially multi-drop or last mile couriers have really taken a liking to it. So for example, if you have a look at the news, I mean, DPD I think have ordered 5,000. It might be split between the E-Deliver 3 and the E-Deliver 9. By the way, I am planning on reviewing the E-Deliver 3, so make sure you're subscribed and make sure you hit the bell icon as well so you're notified. It's affordable to run. By the way, the affordability aspect of it, you do have to look at, for example, lease pricing. I have noticed that it does vary quite wildly depending on where you're going, so make sure you do look into that before purchasing. It's comfortable, and most importantly, if, for example, you live in an area such as London or Oxford, or in some other areas which are planning on implementing similar zero emission zones, you can save an absolute ton of money if, for example, you are in those areas. And that is even without considering things like fuel savings. So just make sure that you keep that in mind. And most certainly, the Maxus E-Deliver 9, I think personally, is a very, very good van. And, it's been a very good first dip into driving vans, which, I'll be honest, I don't really need to do. My job doesn't really require me to do it. But maybe one day when I'm moving house or I need a larger van to move stuff, I'll definitely try and pick out a Maxus E-Deliver 9 or a Maxus van when I need it. So I think that's pretty much it. So if you like the video or you found it informative, please like the video, dislike it if you don't. Please share this to anyone who may be considering hopping into an electric van, or alternatively is looking for a new van on the market and maybe wants a little change of pace from the diesel Transit, for example. Make sure that you're subscribed if you haven't already. It really, really helps me out, and it will also mean that you are informed when I make new videos. And I think that's pretty much it. So thank you for watching, and talk to you later.